What's going on, guys? It's Tony with Urban Girl Scout Media, coming to you today, living the dream, of course, and preparing to talk to you about what I believe is going to kick off my campaign for Make Magic Great Again, or at least my version of it. I'm sure there's someone else out there that's doing something similar. So let's dive right in. Here's the table. Here's where we need to set ourselves. Core Set 2019 just came out. We're going to skyrocketing. Master sets are gone. Core sets seem to be back. And what the future of Magic needs to be with all those issues together. Let's start with Core Set 19. So I'm looking here at the prices as of July 20th at 3 p.m. and I see the top 10 pricey, most expensive cards are all Mythic Rares. Of course, Big Daddy Nicol Bolas, the Ravager, is the top card right now. So here's my enjoyment or my satisfaction with what I'm seeing here is there's a pretty decent curve. You get down to the 10th most expensive card and you're looking at about $7-8, and it's at a Johnny from the pre-constructed deck, the one you can actually find on this channel. I said that's a really good card, plus you get the pack. It pretty much pays for itself. So, and I think there's some other stuff in it that I'll probably use, but just something to go back and watch. Anyways, so it's a pretty decent curve. 35 is about the mid-range on Nicol Bolas, about 7 or 8's the mid-range on this Johnny, and that's the top to the bottom. So it's not, core sets, there's a lot of cards, and there are some pretty tough cards in this one to like. We'll talk about that. So, all in all, only 2 reprints have cracked the top 10 price sheet, or price point for what we're looking at. 2 reprints, Scape Shift, Crucible Worlds. Neither of these are over $20 right now. The mid-range on Crucible World, $19.95. So just under the mark there. That's going to be really relevant for kind of the next few pieces moving forward. So, not in the order that I introduced it, but we're going to talk about master sets next. Here's what I've got kind of on master sets to bring it in. We apparently are not going to be doing them anymore according to sets after Origins, and we're back. So you never really know. Master sets are really important because that gives them an outlet. That gives them a steady outlet to reprint and continue to... Sorry, I'm a little parched. It gives them an avenue to reprint and gives them, keep cards in the market that are already very popular and very powerful. And honestly, if I was WotC, I wouldn't do away with the master sets because you don't really have much research and development compared to a new set. I understand you want to make it draftable and all that, but at the end of the day, you need to put some good reprints in there, and that'll set up a lot of the box for you. That's my little bit on the master sets. I think it's absurd how much they charge, and I think it's absurd that they are stopping them because they are wildly popular. Moving on, let's talk about the reserve list. So the reserve list has been absolutely out of control. I mean, absolutely out of control. There's no way for us to ignore the fact that the reserve list has the cards on it. I'm going to pull up a few things here just to point out. Lion's Eye Diamond is at $258. Taiga from Unlimited, $274. Let's go find a Tundra from... Let's find a unlimited land that doesn't really see much play. Plateau, $332. Ladies and gentlemen, Plateau from Unlimited is $332. Doll Hair's American. Now again, this is perfect world finding the right people, but nonetheless. City of Traders, $295. What else would be worth pointing out here? Demonic Horde. God, that card's so garbage, and it's at $235.88. That's the beta version, obviously, but alright, so here's my concern is these cards continue to go up in price. It's to the point now where lands are out of control. I mean, Gaia's Cradle, Tolarian, Sarah's Sanctum, the dual land. The price point on these is getting out of control. And it's getting to the point where I don't think we as Magic players should be okay with it, because it's not Magic players that are truly controlling the majority of these cards. I'm not going to lie. I have some of these cards that I've even said here today. I don't think that the consistent increase in price over the past 2 years on almost all these cards in the reserve list is good for the game anymore. Most importantly, my biggest reason is, think about Legacy. Legacy is getting priced out. I mean, and it's not just... Legacy kind of got to the point where it was tough to buy in because of how expensive and rare the cards were. We got Modern. Then we get to the point where we're at now, where Legacy is so expensive and the cards are even more rare that you have a hard time maneuvering what kind of deck you want to make. You're incredibly limited unless you have a high amount of exposable income. There's just a lot of... Did I say exposable? Disposable, sorry. There's just a lot of factors to take in there. I think that that's bad that you have players within the game, within the Legacy format, people that I know who've been playing it forever. This isn't off the internet, and this isn't just one person. These are several people that I know in person have said, I'm just going to buy the proxies because they're close enough and I'll go play the local tournaments. So just let that settle in. You've gotten to the point now where players who've been playing Legacy for years and who want to kind of brew a little bit and try different things and not be stuck to just one deck for the rest of their days playing the format, you've got them now talking about going and getting proxies. These are the same people, some of them, not all of them, but there are a few of them, they know who they are, who years ago were really irritated by the proxies. So the creation of proxies and kind of the coming of the proxies, if you will. So this is a very raw and vulnerable time for Legacy alone, just based on the reserve list. Vintage and all those other formats are going to be affected. EDH is actually truly affected by this as well. And for anyone that is listening to this who is an EDH player who doesn't pay attention to the reserve list, I'm not telling you to go and do all this research. I'm not telling you to really put an opinion on it. What I'm telling you is there's actually really good cards on the reserve list that would just be fun to have in decks. I mean, it's that simple. So, I mean, that's really the most important thing for you guys to know, is that there are just a ton of cards on the reserve list that if you can get your hands on, they're really fun. Some great legendary creatures to play. I mean, I just... That's kind of where I'm at, I guess. So, that's my 3 fronts. Core set, kind of a, not a bad core set. The master sets are gone. Reserve list is killing the prices. So what's the big suggestion? Here we go. In my opinion, core sets are meant to be the, you give us those reprinted cards, you give us a few originals, it's generally reprints. You don't want to do master sets, and some of you might already see where I'm going with this. You don't want to do master sets, so that's fair. So here's my suggestion, is we use core sets as the reprint set. Every core set will have this is going to be a little specific on the rules because I've had a little bit of time to think about this now. But here's the rules. Every core set will have one mythic and one rare reprint for all 5 colors, a colorless, and I haven't really figured out the land. I think it's just going to be like just one rare or mythic land reprint. The cards that are going to be reprinted cannot have been printed or reprinted in any main set. So like the dual decks and all that crap doesn't count. It can't have been printed in any of those over the past 3 years. Maybe 2 years. I don't know. I think 2 years and then doing it on the 3rd year would be a good idea. There will be a price point as well on what cards need to be qualified for the reprint. So for example, if a modern card that sees play in, let's say, 10% of decks, let's say Liliana, let's take Liliana, she's over $100 and she sees play in over 10% of a format, of any format, then I think that's kind of the example of what I want to use, but it would be tiered for each format, or just be tiered for what's legal right now in Modern and so on. It's kind of tough to figure out what that's going to be for the reprint policy on that, but I think there has to be a price point. I think there has to be, if it's being used in Modern, Legacy, or EDH meta, over a certain percentage. So I was using that as an example. So that puts them roughly, what is that, 13, 14-ish cards, maybe more if they want to go a little heavier, just reprints, okay? And when I say reprints, I'm talking about legitimate cards, like Scape Shift and Crucible Worlds would have been legitimate selections. It does kind of put some pressure on them to continue to find those great cards, but nonetheless, that's our job. Now, here's where I think it's time to possibly piss off a few people. We're also going to bring back lottery cards. However, we're going to print the lottery cards at the same rate as before, only we're going to do 5 to 10 each core set following the exact same reprint rules. However, the lottery cards will be reserved list cards. And what we'll do is they'll slowly trickle in those cards back into the market. Those cards will not be tournament legal in anything. Their tournament legality will not change. They're not going to be standard or modern legal. If they're not legal in Legacy or EDH, they're still banned. Simple as that. I don't know what the price point or meta would be. I don't think that would apply well to this because it's going to be such a small and specific amount. But for the first one, I think you have to do it big. So for the first one, you would do, in my opinion, at least 3 lands, and I could give you a few of them right here. I mean, we could do Tolarian Academy. I think that would be a really good land reprint. Sarah's Sanctum is another one that I think would do really well, especially with these new EDH decks coming up. So there's 2 good ones. I don't really want to say the dual lands, but I feel like the dual land, at some point we have to talk about that because that's kind of what this is going to be geared towards. I've always wanted to get my hand on a couple of Volrath Stronghold. So, I mean, there's another one that could get reprinted. I'm just kind of going down the list here of reserve list lands just so I don't overlook anything. And then you could look at all sorts of different creatures. You could do 1 for each color. You could just do 5 or 6 cards total. You have a lot of options. That's really the point I'm trying to make. So you would still control a heavy amount of what's coming into the market. I mean, it wouldn't be a large amount. What were the lottery cards at this year? They didn't do all that crazy in terms of the volume. So I don't think it's a bad decision to reprint just a few of these. Try it out. You could look at information set forth by reprints like Tarmogoyf and Liliana, and I understand those aren't reserve lists, but they are protected in the modern game almost as much, if you think about it. They really are. There's a few other cards that they've only had 1 or 2 printings, and they're very heavily protected. Think about the fact that Tarmogoyf, Lily, Snapcaster, those are playable in Modern and Legacy, right? Dual lands are only playable in Legacy, not Modern. So they've had to cap the reprints to fill both sides of it. I'm only talking about capping the reprints to fill the Legacy Vintage EDH side, which is the EDH Vintage side. I don't anticipate that being as strong as the Legacy side. So I don't anticipate those two being that overwhelming. I actually think the Legacy side would be the overwhelming force behind it, because players want to play Legacy. Trust me when I tell you this. If you can find a non-douchebag area to play Legacy in, it's a wonderful format to play. Certain decks in every format just kind of make you cringe. Legacy has its ample share, and maybe a few extra, depending upon your opinion. There are times where Legacy can be interactive, and there are times where Legacy is over in turn 2 or 3. So, depends on what you're looking for, I guess. But that's my idea. So we would do a core set, and I guess they would just name it, keep naming it the next year, because for some reason we can't do the year we're on. So it'd be core set 18 or 19 or 20, 21, so on and so forth. You give me 6 rares and mythic rares from the 5 original colors in the artifact. You got to give me 1 good land, and when I say good land, it's got to be a rare or a mythic rare. There will be some sort of scale based on how long it's been since it's been reprinted, what metas are using it at what percentage, and what the price point is to help determine that. Also, cards cannot be reprinted at a different rarity. So you can't upshift or downshift. They have to be printed the same rarity. There are plenty of examples of why it's good, but in my opinion, there are more examples of why it's bad. So upshifting the rarity when there's already mythic in place, I'm not trying to see that crap. The lottery cards, like I said, I think a healthy 5 to 10 reserve list cards. And before people freak out, think about something. If you have the reserve list, and let's say you have Taiga, decent land, right? And then they reprint a foil, this pretty foil, amazing art. You're telling me you wouldn't want to get your hands on it? You're telling me it wouldn't have some value? And you're telling me that the market would be that saturated by them that it would ruin the price of the other cards? If anything, what would happen is those cards would come into the market, the new Taigas come into the market, and then the old Taigas, either those people who are holding them want to sell them to the people trying to complete their sets, or they hold on to them and complete their own sets, or they hold out and wait for that dip and that gain back. I don't see the old cards dipping and not gaining their ground back. They may not get back to where they are today because there's a few more in the market, But those greedy collectors that have a majority of them, you think they won't get their hands on some of those lottery cards? Like that's the point. So that's it. So that is I guess my big announcement, or phase one, if you will, of Make Magic Great Again. I'm excited to finally be able to release this because this is an idea I've been working on for a while. Really, since they started spoiling, or since they released Core Set, I've been kind of just burnt out with the experience of the reprint policy to the point where I put this together. And I've been kind of tweaking this for about a week in terms of just looking at if this would work, or in terms of if this would be just kind of me rambling into the microphone, because it was kind of tough to form everything. Because one thing I want to point out is I actually have notes here in front of me of what cards would get reprinted and then how you'd cycle it. So for example, like I'm just going to use Summoner's Pack because it was something I put could be a rare, depending upon if it gained that popularity again. Tarmogoyf, and even cards I said previously like Snapcaster Mage, Lily, some of those Eldrazi's, things like that. So, and I wouldn't be opposed to situations where maybe there's a very powerful monocolored land being used as that mythic or rare, you know. I don't know. I don't know if that would work too well now that I think about it. But like I said, I have a list of reserved list cards here too that I was looking at where, what would be some cards that you could realistically, what would be some cards that could be printed that deserve that reprint? Well, Metalworker is a card that I think deserves a reprint. Gilded Drake is another one. Humility, up until recently when it dropped back down to $50, I'm not too worried about it. Some of the other cards, I think like Copy Artifact is a pretty decent card. Peacekeeper is a card that should see some printing. I know that just went through a huge uptick. Phyrexian Dreadnought, like they redid the crew vehicle version of that. Just give me the damn card. So that's it. That's it, guys. I don't got anything else. I think that's a pretty good stopping point. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little idea. Like I said, let's make Magic great again. There's other fronts of this idea that I want to kind of roll out. And there's other pieces to it. I think that Magic has several issues, and one of the first big issues is how to kind of reprint and keep this market of cards under control. So that's all I got. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. My name is Tony with Urban Girl Scout Media, living the dream as always. Thanks, guys.